So when we talk about the stress triad, I want to start by looking at as the way that mental health affects chronic health. When we look at mental health in chronic health, we want to look at the way that the chronic illness is affecting you as a person. And the best way to describe that is looking at a triangle and looking at it in the way that it's a triad. Stress has external stressors on one side, has internal body responses on the other, and then internal perceptions. So we can say that stress affects us as a main contributor to causing a crash cycle, like we talked about the other day. It's that way that stress is the pressure we feel to complete tasks the way that we did before we were sick. So we're always judging ourselves based on a healthy person. What can they do? And maybe you have some healthy people in your lives that you compare yourself to. That's normal. It happens. I do it too. And often what happens when we have that is it leads to a sense of competition with our pre-diagnosis selves, or our perception of our self-image isn't the same because we judge ourselves based on that healthy self's abilities that we no longer have. And this can keep us stuck in mental cycles that trigger shame and guilt, that we're not able to help our family the same way we used to be able to, or we're not able to have that ability to be the mom we imagined we would be. I know that one's one that I get stuck on. I'm not able to be the mom I thought I would be if I was healthy. And with a diagnosis, my pain can get into the way that our day is going to go, and it changes. And I have to try and explain that to kids that don't understand why mommy has health problems. Maybe you can relate. And so we find ourselves wrestling with this. We may need help finding ways to cope with that and grieve these losses. They're big losses, and we don't always want to acknowledge them. And so that's where I come in as a counselor. I help people go through that grief cycle, find new ways to cope with loss of our previous self, loss of our dream of what we would be as a mom, loss of how we will work in our career, losses on top of losses. And so this is the stress that affects our bodies, and this is internalized. It's important to note that the stress is not just emotional. It also affects as a result of interactions between people outside of ourselves, that triad of an external stressor. When we go to jobs and we have a hard day at work, that might affect you with chronic illness differently and harder than it will another person. That hard day at work could cause a pain flare. That hard day of work is going to be different for the way that you internalize it than the way that another person internalizes it. And also whether or not you're able to have a job. That loss of job, loss of career could also play into how mental health is affecting the chronic illness. And when we grieve those losses, it can cause pain flare-ups if we don't cope properly. So there's a number of factors there that we want to think about. Also, the threats of losses can cause internal physical responses. The threat to the loss of a relationship due to chronic illness is a big one. And the actual loss of relationships because the other people don't know how to live with someone with a chronic illness. These are things that we work on. And this physical response isn't conscious. We're not in control of how our body responds to stress. And so what can happen is our body is overwhelmed with the stress. This is unconscious, and the pain flares up. And we might go into a fight or flight response because the way that the nervous system responds to pain in our body, it's all neurologically connected. So the autonomic nervous system stress response connects to the brain, and that connects to our immune system, our hormone glands. And so Dr. Gabor Mehta talks about this in his books and puts it as the nervous system is like a giant electrical grid. The wires, all the systems together. And I think that's such a beautiful way of thinking about it because our body is all connected. Our immune responses, whether we'll be able to fight off illness or flu bugs is also based on what kind of stressors are on us, how we perceive the stress, if we can cope with it or not. And that all plays into whether or not we'll be able to move on and get better or adapt to life with chronic illness. So these are just a couple factors that I look at when I work with clients with chronic illnesses. The external factors, the internal factors, and our perception. 3 things. Thanks. Bye for now.